Anybody, anywhere,
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen.
This pass caught by Paulsen, the tight end.
And from 106.7 The Fan, Grant Paulsen.
Welcome in to Take Command, a emergency take command of sorts as we react to big news out of Commanders camp. You can watch us on 106.7 The Fan and Team 980 YouTube channels. Of course, you can listen to this audio wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe, rate, review, and please spread the word that we'll be here throughout the offseason reacting to all of the big news coming out of the Commanders facility. But Logan, we got to start with two coordinators out and the bigger of the developments. We talked about this on our last pod. There were rumors flying around. It's looked like maybe Washington, Kliff Kingsbury headed for divorce, and it has indeed happened after 2 years. Kliff Kingsbury's out. Your reaction?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, first and foremost, like, it's always tough when someone loses their job. And again, like, this sounds like it was maybe a little bit more mutual than a straight firing. So in some ways, that's good because they're kind of making the decision to move on together. But I always think, man, this is just a tough time of year for these types of things. And I have a lot of thoughts about, you know, what this means for the offense and what this means for the team. But yeah, my initial thought is just like, it's tough when you see, you know, two guys that I have a lot of respect for, and Kliff and Dan, not be able to figure it out and have to kind of go their separate ways.
Which is what happened. I'm told they had a meeting. They tried to hash out not only some thoughts on the agreements, disagreements on how the offense was run this year, but probably more importantly, the vision for the offense in the years ahead with Jaden Daniels. And it wasn't that long of a meeting because, you know, I was told kind of late morning, oh, this could linger for a while. Not sure if anything will be determined today. Within an hour and a half, we found out that Kliff Kingsbury was indeed not going to be coming back. So I guess let's just start with how surprised are you that we're here? They were a top 10 offense a year ago, and they were elite. I mean, I've made the case. I will double down on this today. Still, outside of Jaden Daniels, you can make the case that the single most important person in the building last year in the NFC Championship game appearance season was Kliff Kingsbury. I thought their offense, you know, they didn't punt for weeks at a time, was really, really impressive. He did some really good things. Obviously, this year with the injuries was not at the same level. They went from 5th to 22nd in efficiency, but they were still 12th in yards per play. Are you surprised that they couldn't figure this out amid the results that they had the last 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a little surprised because, again, like you said, Kliff was outstanding last year. I thought he did some really good things this year. I think it comes down to some type of fundamental belief or some type of crack in the offense that, you know, we've discussed a little bit. So, like, you know, I kind of was working through, like, what I think it could be. Like, obviously, there is this thing in the air raid offense where you're kind of throwing to open up the run. You are putting a little bit more pressure on a young quarterback. The protection, we talked about this on the show on Tuesday, is not as kind of comprehensive. It puts a little bit more on the quarterback to identify the rushers, get the protection targeted, kind of throw hots, things like that. And so I do think maybe I could see that there would be a difference of opinion because, again, Kliff is so locked in on his offense. And, like, when you have an offensive coordinator, like, I want that. I want them to believe passionately in what they're doing and what they're calling. And obviously there seemed to be some type of disconnect with what Dan and whoever else in the building wanted in terms of quarterback development, plan for the offense moving forward. And I don't think Kliff felt comfortable doing that. Again, this is all speculation, just to be clear, but I do think that, like, if you wanted a certain offense, like if you're Dan, you want a certain offense, like, I don't know if Kliff's going to be able to provide that for you, or I don't know if Kliff believes strongly enough to make that change to his offense. And I think that's kind of where we end up today, you know, is them kind of, again, not aligned in terms of the best way to handle Jaden Daniels' development moving forward, the offense moving forward, and you get this parting of ways.
I think it's very okay to change your mind, right, if that's what happened. But when I hear you saying what you did, which I think is very reasonable, my first thought is you hired Kliff Kingsbury, right? Like, if my wife came to me today and she said, bro, you watch way too much football. You are up at night watching late night NHL and NBA games, and you eat fast food. Like, what is going on with you? You know what I would say? I would say, you married me. All of this was happening before you said yes when I got down on a knee, right? They went and found Kliff Kingsbury, pried him out of a deal that he basically was signing with the Raiders, and brought him here. And Kliff Kingsbury showed up. So like the stuff that it sounds like doesn't work for them is very Kliff Kingsbury stuff. This is who you hired. What's the disconnect there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that I'm having a hard time kind of chewing over at the moment as well. Like you brought in a guy who runs a very specific type of offense. He's run that type of offense since he's gotten in the league, since he was in college. Obviously, it's changed and evolved. And I think you even see slight evolutions this year. So it's not like it's this completely static picture, but he's got principles that he believes in. It's just like Kyle Shanahan. If you bring Kyle Shanahan in, he's going to run the football a ton on first and second down. They're going to run a lot of outside zone. They're going to use it to set up the play action pass and boot. And it's like, okay, like now I'm mad that I don't have a spread guy here to run that kind of offense. It is a little bit confusing. And again, like I have gone through phases of being like, man, I really need to understand. But I think the thing that I've kind of reconciled here is I don't need to understand anything, right? Whatever in the building happened is information that we're not privy to necessarily. And obviously we can speculate. And the only speculation I can see is that Dan and whoever else felt that they wanted to move in a different direction with the quarterback, with the offense, to protect Jaden, to protect the team, to insulate the defense, whatever that reason is. And again, like you look at teams that play a little bit more complementary football, traditionally they run the football a lot. And so, maybe that's kind of what they're aiming at here.
But Washington ran the football a lot. So here's the problem I have with like the run pass balance thing, which I keep hearing and was told by people in the building, out of the building, like was part of the frustration. So this is what I would love to drill down on, right? Is what does that mean exactly? Because if you look at the numbers, Washington ran the ball at a 59% clip on 1st and 10, one of the highest rates in the league. They were actually 4th overall. It's not the best way to do it in just total quantity because obviously every team runs different number of plays. But only 3 teams ran the ball more on 1st and 10 this year, more times than the Commanders did. They actually threw the ball the fewest amount of times in the NFL on 1st and 10. Then if you actually dive into game situations, so like when they were trailing, they ran the ball 10% more than league average. When they were leading, they ran the ball 8% more than league average. When they were tied, they ran the ball more than league average. So what I wonder is, as I've because I'm doing the same thing you're doing, speculating on the outside, but wondering, what's going on here. I have to wonder, is part of it like, a lot of those runs are scrambles. A lot of those runs, not a lot, but some of those runs are designed quarterback runs. Does Dan Quinn possibly just want more runs from running backs? More of those plays. Like we saw this evolution in Baltimore where Lamar ran less and Todd Monken was basically, I don't know if he was instructed to or decided to run quarterback designed runs more infrequently as they got Derrick Henry. Like this year, I think Washington was 25th in rushing attempts by running backs. And maybe he wants just like a more traditional running game in that sense. That would not shock me. I would say, then why did you draft Jaden Daniels? Because that's part of the superpower. But that's another conversation for another time. But do you think I'm onto something here? Or like, just give me a thought on the run-pass balance thing, because I've dug into it. And this is not a team that doesn't run it often enough. Like, that'd be hard to argue.
Yeah, so I think the thing when I hear people say that, one of the things that I would, trying to peel back the layers and kind of look through the fog here a little bit, is that one of the things that Kliff does is they're going to run a lot from the gun and they're going to run a lot from the spread. You are limited in that environment in terms of what you can do from a play action pass standpoint. It's just how it works, right? You kind of lose the ability to kind of get the back. I don't have a problem with running a play action pass from the gun, but you need to think about what that looks like to the defense. You need to think about what the action looks like. You need to think how the route distributions you can get to. So like everyone, like just as a point of comparison, right? Let's talk about Kyle. Let's talk about Sean, right? They're in 11 personnel a lot, but they're in condensed formations quite a bit, right? So they're in formations that look like they're the way they build their game plan is they build it off run formations first. So like, how do we block these safeties? How do we block these overhang players? How do we block the late run fit player? Oftentimes you got to motion it tight. You got to shift to tight. You got to get in something where the receivers can go crack those quarter safeties. And then once we've built that formation, we kind of extrapolate out our play action pass game, our drop back passing game. Obviously, Kliff kind of goes the other way. He says, these are the formations we want to throw the ball out of. This is our base formation. And then we're going to kind of throw these gun runs, these spread runs in, and kind of it's like an afterthought almost. And so when you hear, when I've talked to people in the building a little bit, they say we want to match up run and pass a little bit more. And again, that's something that I think you could see here. And I think, that would be a fundamental cornerstone of Kliff's office that I'm sure he wouldn't want to depart from.
Right.
So again, I think that's a connection that you got to think about. And then with regards to the quarterback run thing, I'm not sure it has to do anything with the running, with the running, but when you're in spread a lot, one of the things you're asking the quarterback to do a lot is make consistent decisions. Like when you are going to use quick game, RPOs, zone read even, to maximize your offensive efficiency, you're asking the quarterback to consistently make decisions, as opposed to just being under center and, hey, we're going to run power to the right, we're going to run power to the left, we're going to run counter. And then on the play action pass, instead of reading a 5-man full field concept, now we're just going to read, hey, we got a deep cross and a post, right? We're going to read that out, and that's a little bit easier. So I do think getting into more of a quote-unquote West Coast Kyle Shanahan derivative insulates the quarterback a little bit more, and that's the whole cornerstone of designing that offense, right? Is like we're going to run the football, set up play-action shots, insulate the offensive line, and that's really why that works. And so again, the spread is kind of the reverse of that. We're going to leverage the quarterback, we're going to leverage the offensive line, and that's fine, but you got to know what you're getting into with both systems.
Yeah, so and this is where it gets complicated, right? And I should say this too, and Logan Paulsen, Grant Paulsen with you on Take Command. I had gripes that we talked about as a show quite a bit, honestly, this year. And I agree with them on some of what they perceive to be the shortcomings, I bet you, of this offense. Like there are things, it's just because you played and you know more about it than I could know in one cuticle in my whole body. But like you're a Kyle Shanahan disciple as a player. Like I covered that team. That's what I fell in love with offensively. Like that's kind of how I see the world. And so, yeah, I similarly look at Kliff's offense and see some of the shortcomings that I don't love. So like in this case, the fact that he doesn't marry play action as well as some of the guys around the league that operate more under center and some of those things do, I totally agree with that critique. And I bet you I agree with most of the issues they have with this offense. I guess two things can be true, though. Mm-hmm. There are shortcomings. There are things that annoyed me. And at the same time, it's just surprising to me after 2 years with his results, with the year he just had, with the lack of man games, number one in man games missed and injuries, backup and third string quarterbacks, that he's out. That's all. And in a world where I've basically said, no one should be questioning Adam Peters' job security, and I still feel that way. No one should be questioning Dan Quinn's job security. He gets a get out of jail free card because of year one. I don't know why Kliff wouldn't have been afforded that same opportunity is kind of the confusion for me.
So I think, again, this is something that I've thought about too. And I got to go and look back and watch the games and kind of think about what is something that maybe I'm undervaluing in terms of exposure. And the one thing that really just jumps out to me is the protection plan versus teams that provide aggressive pressure. And that's been something that's been an issue since last year, right? We just didn't play as many teams last year that were super aggressive in terms of pressure. Like I look at the plan versus Minnesota, for example, and it's not the route concepts, it's the protection plan. Like our plan to handle zero, our plan to handle cross dog, how we're having the offensive line set. Like I look at other teams and how they handled it, and I was like, man, that's probably a better, more comprehensive plan. And one of the tools they use is they say, hey, we're going to kind of pack it in. We're going to get it tight. We're going to, have more protectors in here. We're going to work run game a little bit more. And again, you look at that game where they kind of started throwing the ball a ton after that first drive. And you look at the Green Bay game where that team was getting after us a little bit, right? And it was a close ball game. And if you kind of said, hey, we're going to play this complementary style of football, we're going to run the football, we're going to be a little bit more conservative, a little bit more selective about when we're throwing the football, maybe we're in a better situation. You look at the first Dallas game, same type of thing. And again, I think there's more responsibility in that first Dallas game on Jaden Daniels' performance. I think he missed some throws and things like that where Kliff did a great job cultivating opportunity. But I do think that's the thing that really comes to the forefront is when they've played teams, in my opinion, that have had comprehensive pressure plans and designs they have struggled to execute the offense, even like at a fundamental level. And so as you're going to play more teams that bring a lot of blitzes and put you in these leverage situations, like that's going to be tough. And so I do think like what they're talking about, run pass balance, I think applies to those games probably more than other games. Because I think when you look at the Broncos game, when you look at the Atlanta game, like games where the offense was fine, they're kind of playing these more conventional, more vanilla fronts. And everyone talks about, oh, well, the Broncos, they get a lot of pressure. Yeah, but they rush 4, they rush 5. It's more conventional looks. I felt very comfortable with how they handled those blitz looks. When you play these teams that are a little bit more exotic, a little bit more aggressive, again, leaning into running the football insulates the quarterback, insulates the offensive line. And are you always on schedule? No, right? Because you're going to take some negative runs. But understanding the complementary nature of field position and balance in those games specifically come to the forefront. Now, that's 3 games this year, right? And so is that enough to kind of warrant moving on from somebody who was overall relatively successful? I don't know. But, and again, this is what Logan Paulsen, head coach, would do. So this is not necessarily what Dan Quinn would do. But these are the conversations I'm sure they had. And again, like if I'm saying in these games to Kliff, you need to run the football more. We need to get more conventional in terms of our backfield sets, pro sets. And if I'm Kliff, I'm saying, dude, like, I don't believe that's the best solution for this problem. And if that's what's happening, there's a fundamental schism there. And I understand why they chose to move on from each other.
And I also wonder this too. And I don't know this, okay? I just haven't had enough conversations with the people involved and I'm not in the building. But I do wonder, my time around and in the league makes me think, more times than not, when you have a defensive-minded head coach at odds with like a play caller OC and firing him, or in this case, this mutual parting of ways or whatever, a lot of times you hear these things like complementary football or run pass balance or whatever, and just the very DNA and philosophy they have on football can be different. Like if Dan Quinn believes that the run is the priority essentially, or that the whole point is to run the football so that you keep the football. And Kliff Kingsbury believes, like I do, let's say, that you keep the football so that you can run the football. Like I'm a throw to set up the run guy, essentially. I am it doesn't matter how you do it. You stay on the field. Third down conversions, passing the football, those types of things. Like the old adage, and I just think we're smarter now in 2026, is like, that you like establish the run. I don't believe really in that. I believe in establishing being on the field, time of possession.
Correct, yeah.
And that like I heard, I was listening to someone yesterday and they're like, well, how many times did they run it last year? How many times did they run it this year? And like, that was their comp of like how committed they were to the run. Well, that's incorrect and ridiculous because number one, you're not accounting for how many plays you ran, which was a lot more the year you were good and winning. But like the point is,
But in some ways, it supports your point, though. It supports your point, though. Like if we're running more plays, like we're getting more touches for the back. And that's something we've talked about on this show.
After a game, I'm like, Bill only got 9 carries. And we look at it, we're like, well, they ran 44 plays. Nobody got any. Terry got 2 targets. If you run 67 plays. So that's kind of my point. I don't know this, but a lot of times the offensive-minded guy might be like, yeah, we didn't get enough plays so I could get to the runs. And the defensive-minded guy or the more traditional guys going, hey, we didn't get the run established. I don't know if that's a thing, but it would not be the first time if that's a thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and again, like you can do both. I think when you look at like Seattle's offense as a point of comparison, they run the ball a ton on first and second down, right? But they have a really good third down play action pass game, and kind of the drop back game is very efficient, and then they're really aggressive on fourth down. So what are they doing is they're staying on the field. Like at the high school level, like you see this all the time, right? Good offenses are hyper aggressive because in high school you run the ball 80% of the time. And so what happens though is a lot of these teams go for it on fourth down because the ultimate goal of getting touches and getting running volume is staying on the field, right? So this is where it's like, I do think there were, again, like this is, again, I think Kliff did a great job this year. I think he did a great job last year. There are times where you can see him and you're like, you are not calling this game in a way that is complementary to the defense. And so what I mean by that is you are being hyper aggressive. You're taking shots, which again, I love. Like I'm an offensive minded guy. Do it. But like you're prioritizing explosive offensive production at the expense at times of staying on the field. And I think like that's the thing where it's like, if you want to play this complementary football game with a defense that's struggling, I think there's a legitimate argument to be made that say, hey, we need to be a little bit more conservative, like get the first down, get us to 4th and 2 so we can go for it on 4th down, right? Be a little bit more macro or micro instead of macro in terms of offensive ideas so that you can stay on the field so we can shorten the game, shorten the number of possessions, shorten the exposure to the defense. Now, like to your point, the methodology and how to get that done, I think is different. Like when you look at 2024, they ran the ball on 1st down. The thing, the trump card last year was that Jaden Daniels did a great job making decisions of when to scramble, keeping them in 3rd and manageable and 4th and manageable situations. And so that is a variable this year that was completely off the table. That was in like a completely different part of everything, quite frankly, this year, right? And so I think not having that and not having that down-to-down efficiency, you felt some of the warts and exposures of the offense, and you felt negative game flow. And so I do think, like, yes, defensive coaches tend to lean more into that game flow complementary football, but I also think it is a thing. It's a stylistic thing. Now, how to accomplish that is completely different, but I do think that's something that I think that's a good point, and it's something that needs to be talked about. And again, like it might seem a little bit old school, but it is a relevant factor, especially when your defense is struggling. I think that's the thing I want to point out. When your defense is struggling, you have to call games accordingly.
3rd down, last year, Washington was 6th. This year, they were 21st. It was one of the biggest drop-offs for them statistically.
I mean, you could feel it, right?
Oh, 100%. And, 4th down rate we knew was going to come down. They were still really good on 4th down. But a year ago, it was historical. It was 23 of 26. So those count too. That's 23 times you didn't convert on 3rd down that you would subsequently convert. So really that percentage of being in the top 10 in the NFL is closer to 1 when you think about it, because you didn't end up punting on that 4th down anyway. I want to get into some of the names trickling out about OC options for Washington. And I also want to drill down a little more on Kliff's offense. We'll do that next on Take Command. Welcome back, Take Command. Logan Paulsen and Grant Paulsen. All right, before we get into some of the options for the next offensive coordinator here in Washington, what this should look like, how they should try to help Jaden Daniels, and what the best way forward is. I'm really curious about this, and I think your insight on this, Logan, is particularly helpful because I don't know that anyone else in the market like knows it like you do and can drill down in this way. So if a team were to call you, okay, and they were to say, I want to know, like, what are the 3 biggest strengths of Kliff's offense? And what are 3 significant weaknesses or areas you wonder about? What would you say? And I bring this up because it is the most unique offense maybe in the league that he runs. Nobody else runs it. We're talking about a no huddle rate, which is, a little bit of a muddy statistic, but that is like 50% higher than anybody else's. We're talking about shotgun versus under center discrepancy that is the largest in the league. Like, he is very unique and one of a kind in how he operates. There are really good things about it. We've seen it. We saw it last year. And then there are some things you've talked about, a couple of them, like the protection thing might show up here. But what are 3 things that you go, I'm just not sure about this? What would you say to this GM that's asking for your input?
About the Kliff offense in general, you're saying?
Like favorite 3 things, least favorite 3 things.
Yeah, so what I'd say my favorite thing is that it really does a good job of helping the quarterback, right? And so, again, like I think it's going to sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. I think it exposes the quarterback more. It leverages the quarterback's decision-making, ability to check into the right looks at the line of scrimmage a little bit more. But in terms of being able to see a defense, like, I can't think of an offense that's better for that, right? You're never in a huddle. You're kind of in this muddle huddle. You get to line of scrimmage. You have literally 30 to 40 seconds, depending on how long you want to take at the line of scrimmage, to see how the defense is aligning. So that gives you a bunch of different things. It lets me find my best matchup. It lets me diagnose coverage at a very, very high level. And again, when you're playing teams that play into that skill set of this offense, like, I think it's very obvious how effective they could be. Think about the Chargers this year. Think about the Bears. Think about multiple games last year where, like, teams fall into the strength of the offense versus teams that are going to do what they do, right? Minnesota, Seattle, right? Like, they're going to kind of play these weird, Philly to a certain extent. We're going to play these match coverages. We're going to disguise. We kind of know the game you're playing, and we're going to manage our defense accordingly. It becomes a little bit more challenging. But I think in terms of strength, that's got to be top of the list. And so when you talk to, like some quarterbacks that have been in this offense, that's one of the things they immediately say is it lets me see it really well. And I know what the defense is doing when they're playing the game the offense wants to play. So that's number one. Number two is, I think, again, to this, it kind of falls into this other line. It lets me find significant matchups. Like if you're in man coverage, and again, I have all this time to look, I look out and I say, oh, here's Terry, here's whatever. I like this matchup. Let's let it rip. And then the other thing too, when done effectively, it creates really effective box structures for the run. Because when we get in these wide bunches, wide splits, like I remember the first time we saw this offense versus New York last year.
I was going to say,
New York,
yes. Yep.
New York was literally like 4 over 3. All guys are moved from the box. It's a 5-man box with a 5-man blocking surface, and you're just running to hit your head on the goalpost, right?
A few weeks ago, I'm trying to remember which game it was. They did this thing where they like split a stack out like on the chalk. You remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And I can't remember which game it was. It was Christmas or what. But they send 3 out, and now you've got one to the other side, and it's like the whole middle of the field is wide open. Now the next time they didn't defend it the same way, but like. Yeah, there is an element of that. That's actually a good strength to this.
So I think that's one of the things that I actually really appreciate about it. Because like one of the things about condensed sets and condensed formations is it becomes really hard to diagnose what the defense is in. They can disguise for a lot longer because they don't have to defend hash to hash, right? Everything's right there in front of you. Now, the advantage of that is that we can get people blocked up and get whatever and work that play action shot. But the thing about Kliff is like when they spread you out, man, it's like, I know what we're doing. And I, as a center, right, offensive lineman, I can get this targeted really cleanly because there's 4 guys here. There's 5 guys here. I can easily see who the secondary run support player is. So I think those are probably the 3 things. Quarterback can see it, find matchups, and then the space it's able to create. And then this is the 4th thing, is when you are going actually hurry up, it really, really, really simplifies what the defense wants to do and can do. And that's another point I think that was a little bit interesting this year in terms of watching Kliff's offense is that superpower was negated because of how slow they kind of went at times, right? They were kind of working substitutions. You could tell they were trying to manage game flow, quote unquote. And when you're doing that, you get more complicated pressures. You get more complicated disguises.
Why were they doing that? Was that to be more complementary to help the defense? Was that because of personnel and injuries and guys not being as capable? Why was that?
I have no idea. That's something we'll have to figure out as we go on here. But that departure, I thought, was an interesting decision, quite honestly, because the thing that makes this offense so devastating, kind of like the Minnesota defense, right, is they are dictating to you. And all of a sudden, when we take our foot off the gas and we go a little bit slower, and we're not in the hurry up, and we're kind of working personnel shifts, and the refs holding the ball and all that kind of stuff, the defensive coordinator is like, all right, now we can run our cross dogs. We can run our disguises. We can do everything we want to do. We can get our stuff communicated. I think that's the other thing in a way. And so all the simplicity that you've built into the offense is now able to be matched in a way when you're going at a normal cadence. So those are some interesting things. But those I think I gave you 4, but those are the 4 major advantages, I think, of the offense.
Okay, so now let's get to weaknesses, areas where, again, Kliff wouldn't say, hey, Logan, help me with my offense. But like, what are things that you would say, dude, I don't really get this?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to some of the stuff we've talked about before, right? Like the simplicity of the offense, right, is one of its strengths when you're going fast because the quarterback knows, the receiver knows. But when we're going slow, like defenses understand, like basically what we're trying to do. You don't have this wide array of formations. You don't have this wide array of concepts. You don't have all these rules that you're testing with the defense, right? So a great example of this is, there's that coverage bust that our defense has versus Green Bay, right? Where they motion to a 4x1, backs flat to the flat. And like, that's a very simple concept. It's basically all go, right? With the back pushing out. So it's 4x1, everyone's running vertical. In Kliff's offense, you don't really have those plays because you don't want a motion because it complicates the picture for the quarterback. You don't have the verbiage to accommodate that. And so again, that's a simple play. Everyone runs it, but instead of running it by 3x1 and pushing the back to the receiver to the 3 receiver side, we motion to it. They don't get it communicated. Our defense doesn't, and there's a guy running right open in the seam. So you lose some of those kind of heat check moments or those rule check moments for the defense because it's so simple, right? And I think, again, the simplicity is an asset when executed correctly, but it's also a hindrance in some of those moments. I think the other thing too is running surface stuff. You're not going to get a lot of complicated running surface. And it's the same thing with the pass stuff. So like, let's say I want to run power. Like if I'm Kliff, I'm going to get into 13 personnel. I'm going to, kind of yo-yo motion the wing tight end. He's going to kick out. We're going to down block and we're going to go. As opposed to when you watch, Green Bay, when you watch Miami, when you watch San Francisco, like they're going to get into 11 personnel, tight end attached. We're going to motion Kyle Juszczyk on a jet motion. He could be either running to the flat or we could be running Wando away. We could be running all these things, but then he stays in, he runs power, and we get a double team, we pull the guard. It just makes, again, the diversity of formation, the diversity of front, not only does it mess up people in terms of coverage responsibilities, but it also makes it challenging in terms of run fit. And I think that's something that, again, the simplicity is an asset when you are going at 1,000 miles an hour, because you know what defenses are going to do and you don't have to account that, you're stressing them with your tempo. And then I think the other element too is just, I'm not saying under center needs to be the main thing of an offense, but just a slightly increased percentage I think would help with certain play action looks, right? Because you're hiding the ball. We talked about this a bunch earlier in the season, but like Miami, for example, they're in the gun a lot. They're in the pistol a lot. They hide the ball with the action of the backfield. They got the quarterback spinning. They got him reversing out. They got him pausing and hiding the football to increase the pull on the linebackers. Under center, you get that kind of naturally. The quarterback's backs to the defense. The ball is being hidden, right? They have to step up. They have to acknowledge the fake. Now, again, this kind of speaks into something Kliff is consciously making a decision to do. When you are hiding the football, the quarterback's eyes are no longer on the defense. And so when they turn around to throw the football, it's harder to diagnose what the defense is in. Kliff basically says, I think it's more advantageous to have the quarterback seeing the coverage and seeing the defense the whole time, which is definitely a school of thought. And I respect that. And you want to walk that line as closely as you can. But I do think, again, when it's simple and when you're playing fast, the offense is awesome. But when you are not, the lack of diversity, I think, starts to pop its head up a little bit and can make it easy on defenses to fit and cover certain concepts.
I think that's well said. Yeah. I mean, the hurry up numbers, extreme, the shotgun numbers, extreme, the lack of under center numbers, extreme. And, we've disagreed a little bit on how pertinent it is to be under center, and that's fine. But the bottom line is, I don't think anyone would disagree. They're the only ones that do it at the percentages they do. It would not hurt to do it a little bit more. Whether that has to be how you major as opposed to minor or not. Like, I'm not saying you have to do it. There's no rules of offense, in my opinion. Like, there's nothing you have to do all the time. But I do think that there are some very basic things they could do to resemble some of the really successful, sustainable offenses in this league that, for whatever reason, they haven't worked in to a greater extent.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, too, that I appreciate about Kliff is he really, I think, knows how to speak to players' skill sets. And so with the under center thing, I kind of had to kick it around a couple times where it's like, how much is he doing that because Jaden Daniels doesn't like it as much, right? Like, I think that's another factor to consider is Kliff does a really good job of kind of speaking to the players and getting their input.
Well, to your point, really quick, at the end of the season, the last two games, they had their highest percentages of being under center. And it was supposedly because, according to the telecast in week 18, Josh Johnson is comfortable under center. So that was something that came up on the broadcast on Fox.
Yeah. And so again, sometimes I think these percentages are really skewed. You look at Jaden did a lot from the gun in college, right? Same thing with Marcus, obviously very comfortable there. And Josh Johnson came in with Gruden, who's an under center guy, and maybe that's where his comfort level lies. And so I think that's another skill that I would point to for Kliff, just maybe not for his offense, but him as a play caller, is understanding what players can and can't do and what they like and don't like, and leaning into those things as much as possible.
All right, so then let's look ahead to what this vision should be, because this is apparently where the disagreement was at this end of year conversation that led to the end of Kingsbury's time here. So what should be the plan for Jaden Daniels, and how involved, I don't want to say should he be in terms of like deciding anything. He's reportedly frustrated with the decision, according to Jordan Schultz of Fox Sports. We know his mom came out and tweeted just a couple of days ago that she was looking forward to year 3 of Kliff Kingsbury. So here we are now. They're going to have a new OC. Jaden Daniels is going to have a new offense to learn, a new scheme going into a critical season. How should they go about finding a fit for Jaden Daniels?
So first off, I'm going to tell you a quick story about why I think this is important. So first off, like when you're a player, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. Like I was here in 2014, 15, and I got cut. And I had Wes Phillips as my coach. And I was like, man, I'm going to go to some place in Chicago. And like, it's not going to be anywhere near as good as what it was here in Washington in terms of coach. Then I get to meet Frank Smith, who's one of the best position coaches that I've ever had. I've learned so much from him, right? And so as much as it is uncomfortable and different to move in a different direction and have somebody that pushes you and challenges you in a different way, sometimes you need that to help with your growth as a player and as a person. So like, I know that this is like, I know that the guys like Kliff, and I understand why they like Kliff. Like Kliff's a good dude, right? He's a smart football mind. But sometimes, again, you need to kind of be pushed to do things that maybe you're not comfortable doing by a coach who's more comfortable with those things to help you grow as a player, right? We just talked about, go ahead, Grant.
Well, and you said they don't know what they don't know sometimes as a player too. Jaden Daniels has only ever done it one way. Like he hasn't seen other ways, right? Especially in that sense. Not like you're Aaron Rodgers and you're 16 and you've had 5 coaches at different, at the quarterback position. Like this is the only thing you've done. You don't know that the next thing might not be great for you. I mean, Caleb Williams may not have preferred to be under center and doing some of this stuff with Ben Johnson. And now he's wearing Ben Johnson's high school jersey walking into the stadium. You know what I'm saying? Like you just don't know.
And so I think that that's something that needs to be considered here. Is I in some ways I'm glad that Jaden is fighting for his guy, and I'm glad that they had a good relationship. But like it's like with your kids, man, they don't want to eat the vegetables, they don't like the broccoli, they don't want to drink their glass of milk with dinner, right? But you as a parent know that they need those things to promote growth, and I think like that's kind of what I'm looking at here. Is like this is tough because again, like I think. We talked about Kliff and how impressed I was with his offense last year and all the things I liked about his offense this year and the relationships that he's built here. But sometimes these things are necessary. Like a little bit of discomfort is necessary to grow.
So then in terms of finding a fit, would you be, if you're Peters and Quinn here, are you thinking, okay, these are Jaden's strengths currently. These are the things that he does best. Let's find someone who does those things and can amplify that? Or do you not look at it through that lens because he's going to be a different player at the end of this process? Do you go in going, I mean, if you didn't like something about Kliff, they butted heads over whatever the philosophy was, then clearly you want the other philosophy, right? So what is that? I mean, is that a more traditional run game? Is that a someone who, runs the ball more frequently, that has a better protection plan against the Vikings? Like, what are they looking for, do you think?
Yeah, that's a really hard question to know, and like you asked if Jaden should be involved and like, should we be speaking to his strengths? Like I remember having a conversation with Matt Ryan in 2017, 2018 about his relationship with Kyle Shanahan, and Kyle really pushed him to do things that he didn't feel comfortable doing. And they had a very tumultuous relationship, very competitive relationship is the way that Matt characterized it. And that was Matt's best year as a player, right? And so I think you want someone who is going to have a good relationship with Jaden, but is someone who's going to push Jaden. And so I think the crux of your question is, what does that look like? And the answer is, I don't really know, right? I don't know what they're comfortable doing because when they brought Kliff in, I thought, they're doing this in part because he's going to have some familiarity with what Jaden's done, right? So obviously when you're making the decision to move on for the reasons that we talked about, or we speculated on, we don't know for sure, you kind of say to yourself like, well, they probably want something the opposite of that or something more traditional. And so is that going to get Jaden under center more? Sure, but by what percentage, right? How much do you want to push him out of his comfort zone heading into 2026? And the answer is I don't really have a good feel. Like I would think, and I thought this when the first coaching hire went around, you probably want someone from that Kyle Shanahan tree, right? Again, because like Dan has some familiarity with them. Adam has some familiarity with them. They run an offense that has gun principles, but also is under center. They have pistol principles, but they're also under center. So why not lean into that? But again, like, I don't know. That's what I would assume, because again, we're talking about becoming more complicated, more nuanced, more diverse. I'm assuming with the Kliff thing, more runs, more diversity of runs. And so I think like those things, that's kind of what I would look at. But again, I don't really have a good feel, man. I don't really know, like, some of the names I'm hearing, I'm not sure that they fit that bill exactly. But again, it's so early in the process that I'm just saying what I would do, basically.
Yeah. In terms of the names, one of the names that I had thrown out there that I've heard from multiple people will be involved in the process, at least, was Brian Daboll. And just as an example, Brian Daboll's not as big a departure from Kliff as I would assume they would want to make. Not to say he's not a little more traditional in his West Coast principles and things, but I mean, this is also a guy where, Jackson Dart's running around in the blue tent, right? Like, he had Josh Allen, he had Jackson Dart. If you're zigging to get away from the zagging of Kingsbury, I'd like to zig a little bit more. I'd like to go further away than Daboll. That's a name that has come up. Other names to look out for include, Tommy Rees, the OC with the Cleveland Browns under Stefanski, who's got the Notre Dame background. Grant Udinski is going to be a hot commodity this offseason. He's the OC under Liam Cohen in Jacksonville. And then you mentioned there are some Shanahan disciples, namely in San Francisco, that maybe would leave to get to call plays and do some things. But the interesting thing to me is like that they've made this change, and supposedly you would think that means they want to go in a different direction. And then a couple of the names that pop up seem like, maybe they're similar to Kliff in a sense. So I think it's early enough in the process. Maybe it's not worth worrying about. But I'll say this: if Daboll was hired, that would be really surprising to me, just because I don't know how different that would be.
Yeah, and I got to go back and watch more Daboll stuff, but my remembrance of him in Buffalo specifically is they were a little bit more spread, right? Like kind of 11 personnel, gun runs, quarterback run stuff. And that might have been because of what he had there. Because again, when Daniel Jones was the quarterback, and again, Mike Kafka was the OC there, is they did a little bit more traditional run game, a little bit more under center, a little bit more keepers and boots. Again, kind of easier opportunities for the quarterback. And then third down is where they kind of popped into their spread stuff like everybody else does in the league. So kind of getting a feel for like who and what he is, depending on the quarterback, I think is something that's important to note. And I also think it's kind of interesting that he, kind of has a little bit of a reputation for being a guy who can develop quarterbacks. And so maybe that's why you bring him in. Again, it's still early in the process, and that name popped up like yesterday. So I got to go and kind of watch some more of what he used to do. But definitely an interesting hire, at least to my remembrance of what they did in Buffalo and kind of who he was when he first got to New York.
How do you think Daniels would handle being in a super traditional, or let me just say like a Shanahan offense, in terms of like just the under center stuff, the drop back stuff? Like the transition would be difficult. Obviously, he's just never done a ton of that. You think about Caleb Williams in training camp in the preseason and some of the conversations he was having about how hard it was to relearn how to do things and footwork and all that. Like a lot of times you want that in year one for a guy. He's going into a critical year 3. But how do you think he would fit in that type of offense?
I personally think Jane Daniels can do anything. It's just, but to your point, like, where does he have more banked reps? Where does he have more equity? It's in the spread stuff. Like, that's what he did at LSU. That's what he did at Arizona. So again, I think there will be some, where if you want to get more traditional, more under center, there will be some growing pains. Like we just talked about, like it's hard to turn your back to the defense and then turn around and make a decision and throw the football. Like that can be challenging. But I also think like one of the reasons you take him second overall is because you think he can get anything done, right? Like he's a special person. He's a special competitor. He's a special student of the game. And so like, this is why I think you see him as what he is and what he can be. And like, I think there's a lot of people that think he's a special player. So let's lean into that and let's challenge him a little bit and then see what comes out of this thing.
Yeah, and it's also why you should pretty much be able to get whatever coordinator you want, I would think. I mean, if you're dangling Jaden Daniels out in front of him, I don't think that many people are turning that job down. All right, let's get into the defensive side of the ball quickly next. I know that I feel bad for Joe Whitt Jr. for a couple of reasons, right? I mean, number one, he's out of a gig, but like they very careful to say that they mutually parted ways with Kliff, and also we fired Joe Whitt. So like that's tough. It just as a press release. But on top of that, nobody's talking about him leaving. Everyone kind of knew that was going to happen. But we'll get into that next on Take Command. He's Logan. I'm Grant. This is Take Command. We'll be here throughout the offseason with multiple episodes a week, so subscribe, rate, and review to the pod. But we are not surprised by this news. We knew this was coming. This was kind of a formality after he lost his play calling duties. But Joe Whitt Jr. was also dismissed. He's out and was fired by the Commanders. Here's what I find interesting about where they go from here. At least publicly, Dan Quinn said in his press conference that he is open to the idea of calling defensive plays and being the coordinator in addition to the head coach again next year. I think that would be a mistake. I could get into that if you care, but what do you make of him saying that? Why do you think he said that? And do you think that's a possibility as opposed to in this offseason where there's some studs? Brian Flores is not under contract. Jim Schwartz is on a staff that has been blown out. Jeff Ulbricht is on a staff that's been blown out. Who's the other one I really
Raheem Morris.
Jonathan Gannon from Arizona has been fired. Raheem Morris, who's worked with Dan, has been fired. Like, there's just too many good options to not hire one of those guys. But where are you at on this?
First off, why do you think that it's a mistake if he were to retain play calling?
Well, I think, first of all, I want to say he did a really good job, actually. And that doesn't surprise me. Like, he's awesome at that. He's had top 5 defenses his entire career as a D coordinator. And I wanted him more involved. And as soon as he took over more responsibility, they had a lot more success. And I just thought things looked cleaner, were coached cleaner, the communication was better. Like, it's obvious he's really good at it. I just think that he has not proven to me, which is weird for a second-time head coach. I don't know if this was the book on him in Atlanta. You'd have to tell me. But he has not done a good enough job at some of the game managing things. Their timeout situation has been a fiasco. Constantly. That was not just with a third string quarterback this week, like all year long. Some of the challenge things and the machinations of how quickly they get things done. So, like, I don't feel like there's a mastery of the overseeing part of it. So I don't want to add that to his plate. And also, I just think, like, it's one thing if it's him versus Joe Whitt. No problem. Let's do this. But Ulbricht would be awesome. Jim Schwartz could be really good. Brian Flores would be a dream come true. I don't think that's realistic. Raheem Morris would be a very solid hire, I think. Like, there's just really good options to add to a staff and to have another voice in the building. And I kind of also hope it's a guy that's a little bit of a badass and, a little bit of a bad cop too. But that's another story.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And I think, like, if I'm sure Dan would say that's an area that he's got to continue to improve at anyway. Also, if Dan were to retain play calling duties, I think, again, he's shown an ability to do it at a really high level. He's got a really good feel for how to call a game, when to call a pressure, when to call a coverage. And, I quite frankly, like, the way that the defense improved, I also think he's a very good teacher. So, if he feels like he's got that, if he's got that itch, like, lean into it. I think that's something I would encourage him to do if that's something he really wants to do. But if you're going to do that, like, you have to build a staff to accommodate that, right? So, like, I remember, again, Kyle was the last coach that I had that was the head coach and also called plays, right? He had built out the staff around him. Like, the tight end coach, for example, handled all the administrative stuff, worked his schedule, right? Mike McDaniels worked the offensive install and kind of game plan elements. They had a guy on staff that would handle on game day, timeout usage, when to call them, game flow situation stuff, right? And so the whole staff was kind of built around Kyle in terms of offloading responsibility of a traditional head coach. And this was his first year in 2017, so it might have changed since then. But if Dan's going to do it, you better create an infrastructure and a scaffolding around you that allows you to be the best version of yourself on game day. And I'm sure Dan's aware of that. He's seen other coaches do that. To me, it would be no different than if a offensive coach kind of retain play calling duties, right? You just need to build the staff in a way that you can handle what you need to handle. Because I think about one of the things he mentioned about his time in Atlanta was that he was stretched too thin. If you're going to call plays, let's make sure you're not stretched too thin and we can be the best version of ourselves at that, while also being very, very good on game day, game situation management.
Yeah, that's well said. Is there any of those names that interest you or that you're particularly familiar with that you think would be appealing as a coordinator?
Well, quite honestly, all of them. I think, like, that's the thing about it. Like, to your point, it's like they're all kind of studs. You know what I mean?
There's
like,
some good ones, man.
Like Jeff Ulbricht, you talk about kind of an ass kicker, a guy that he was the linebacker coach, assistant defensive coordinator when I was in Atlanta. That dude's a bright, smart, kind of like hard-nosed, blue-collar dude. And like he's coached some awesome defenses up in New York specifically. And obviously this year in Atlanta, I thought did a great job kind of figuring out that young group and getting them on the right track. Like they're detailed. He's smart. He kind of brings that energy. Raheem is one of the brightest football people I've ever been around, right? Like he knows offensive ball. He knows defensive ball. He's been in this quarters match light box structure. He's also been with Jeff Ulbrich, who's going to play heavy boxes and blitz the ton, right? Like he understands defense. He understands philosophy at a high level, and he's a great communicator. Gannon, I mean, his defense in Philly was absolutely stellar. And that was before they were like, the horsemen of the apocalypse in terms of talent, right? Like it was simple. It was straightforward, but they all knew what to do. They knew the checks. And I think there's value to that. And I look at what they did in Arizona, specifically last year when we were prepping them, and they do some fun stuff in terms of putting guys in good positions to be successful. So you mentioned Flores, like, again, I don't think that's a possibility really, but if it does happen, like that dude's an absolute stud. So there's 4 dudes, and I'm sure I'm missing some people that I think are.
Jim Schwartz is the other guy that I think is really good.
Dude, and I think Jim Schwartz, when you look at his defenses in Detroit, when you look at them in Cleveland, like they play with an energy and a mindset that I get really juiced up about. And so you talk about culture builders for a team. Dan does a great job of that. I think your defensive coordinator also needs to have a little bit of that to him. And there's 4 dudes there that are smart, good communicators, at least based on the product they present on the field. They present kind of innovative football philosophy, and they are great mindset kind of tone setters. So I think any one of those dudes would be great complementary fits here. It just depends, like when you have a defensive head coach and a guy with strong opinions on defense, like those guys don't really run Dan's defense, right? Or they haven't been. I think Ulbricht's probably the closest one in terms of a guy that could do it because, again, he's coached with Dan for a long time. But I like all those guys. And I quite honestly, I'd like it if Dan called plays too. Like, I just think like they're in a good spot on that side of the ball in terms of replacing Joe Whitt Jr. And again, there's a lot of talented pieces, and I think they could significantly improve there next season.
Search is on for coordinators on both sides of the ball. We'll keep you company all off season long. As news breaks, you know where to come get Take Command dropped into your feed. Subscribe, rate, and review. Big thanks to our producer, Evan, for putting things together today. For Logan, I'm Grant saying so long for this installment of Take Command.